Live from Lincoln and broadcasting across the state of Nebraska, it's the Average Joe Sports Show. This is the place for Husker sports with the biggest names, the best interviews, and all the inside scoops.
I got a front row seat with a big tub of buttered popcorn and a greasy half-live chicken leg.
Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here with the Average Joe Sports Show. Mark Kraynak, the pride of Fairbury, Bill Doleman, Mr. Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Hope you're well as Portal Madness continues, fellas. A week from today, it ends. That's right. The portal shuts down for most.
Oh,
I know, right? The
for how long? For how long?
I mean, this is it. There's no spring portal. It's just one
There's
and done in January.
And there's no, even outside of port, there's no like possibility of some rando showing up in the summer, anything like that. They're like, right?
No possibility of that. That would never happen.
I'm just thinking back to like what Sierra Wright showed up in like July or something.
Sure.
Right? Like how'd that happen?
That was a different window. The more apt comparison to make would be Mac Markway. Remember that weirdness whenever fall camp started and he just happened to pick Nebraska as a school to attend, and now he wants to walk on the football program.
Is he even real though? Is he even real? We've heard about him. Wow. Is he though?
I'm pretty convinced he is real.
Was he like Laerton Say? Y'all remember that one?
No.
Laerton Say, the recruiting, the fake recruiting, the fake recruit that somebody made up, like in spelled backwards. It's he's not real. Laerton's Day, and he got ranked. He got ranked in like publications.
Well,
They're like, oh, he's a 3-star. Like nobody. He literally was. He's not real backwards.
have you heard the rumor going around the last 24 hours about the defensive lineman that everybody is lined up for? That's supposed to be in Lincoln today.
Is he real?
His name's Kaiser Soze.
Oh. Just like that.
Good.
So we'll talk.
His
He'll flip you.
he did
flip
play,
you for real.
he did have a bit of a limp going on last year on the field, but hoping to get that one.
then it all of a sudden went away.
He'll flip you. He'll flip you for real. I mean, and there's like a recruiting element there. That's well done, Kaiser Soze. So yeah, back to Mac Markway. For real, he hasn't played a snap. He's not real.
No, he does in fact exist. I've seen him in terms of as a football player. I don't know, but in terms of a person, he does exist. But no, do you remember that whole saga where he just showed up and like walked onto the football team? Matt was like, "Oh yeah, we didn't know anything about this. He just happened to pick Nebraska, and we decided to take him on the football team." That's the kind of loophole you could see moving forward. That was also such a strange, like, oh yeah, we didn't know he was coming. Sure, you didn't know he was coming.
I'm sad that
former from LSU. Sure, he just happened to pick you, and he didn't know he was coming.
I love that it's 7:55 a.m. on a Saturday, and we're starting with a massive conspiracy to get a backup LSU tight end. This is so perfect.
I'm sad that Trinidad Chambliss won't get another year of eligibility. Somehow the NCAA slammed that door, but we've had Pavia mania for an extended season, which was fun. It's been a week, guys.
What wasn't interesting though that 24 hours earlier, a 7th-year quarterback at Miami leads the Hurricane into the national championship game, and 24 hours later, one of the great stories of college football in 2025 and now 2026, a Division II quarterback who is the backup at Ole Miss, takes over the starting job midway early in the season, praying mother in the stands.
Right.
Great kid by all, but he's not going to be granted an extra year. While after 24 hours earlier, a guy in his 7th year who has shopped Georgia to Miami, making well over $1 million, well over $2 million, probably $5 million, and gets one of the girls, is in his 7th year playing in the national championship game. But we're not going to give one of the great stories of college football an extra year.
Well, two of his recruiting mates, when he came out of high school, are getting ready for a wild card weekend.
I get that. But Diego Pavia is getting ready for like an elementary school graduation or something. I mean, that's how old that guy is.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy to me that the NCAA, we're putting our foot down on this.
Uh-huh.
yeah.
You know, Sorsby is getting $5 million, and everybody's talking, well, the salary cap. You know, there's $20 million at the settlement. There's not a salary cap. That's just what they get to pay their athletes at their school. The NIL stuff is well beyond whatever they want to pay.
Nebraska.
This is a total aside here, but as we talk about how old Carson Beck is and everything, I saw this stat, and I think you guys would really appreciate it. Malachi Toney was 11 years old whenever Carson Beck started his college career.
That's hilarious.
Okay,
but we're not giving Trinidad Chambliss an extra year. Damn it, we're the NCAA.
Okay, so are we in this weird time? We're in this weird transitional period where it's professional sports now.
Yeah.
Yet it's still affiliated with a university. It's just like nobody even understands. Like there's clearly a market for it, clearly a lot of infrastructure for it. So I don't think it's going to go like, I think you're going to continue to have the Miami Hurricanes, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the whatever. Why are they affiliated with the university anymore? They're
question.
They're professional enterprises.
Good question.
Like I'm trying to explain this to somebody who's not a college football fan, doesn't follow it. The amount of mental gymnastics you have to do to explain, like even yesterday as the confetti's falling, right? Like, so they won it. They're the champions. I'm like, well, they're the Peach Bowl champions.
They won the Peach Bowl.
Like, well, what's that? I thought this was the playoffs. Like, well, it is. It's the playoffs and it's the Peach Bowl, kind of. And then the Orange Bowl is, well, like you can't even explain. It is such a snarled mess. And the amount of like infrastructure that was there, it's all crumbling. And it's like people are just hanging on for dear life to this like former structure that just doesn't exist anymore. It's wild. And then Indiana's got an entire team full of 6-year guys, 5-year guys. I don't know.
And Mark Cuban writing checks. And don't forget, one of the reasons, if not the reason, Kyle Whittingham is out at Utah is because of that venture capitalist $500 million infusement of cash into the University of Utah athletic department. So that whole financial conglomerate that is investing in Utah athletics basically said, we need the new guy. You know, it wasn't like Kyle Whittingham wanted to leave coaching, obviously, because he's got one of the most high-profile jobs in all of America in sports.
Yeah, he's good enough for that.
But somebody comes in and says, we're going to give you, $500 million, and we'd like you to make a coaching change. Well, let's take that to the Board of Regents. And,
right. That's what I'm saying.
And we'll discuss
Where does the universe?
Yeah.
Also, when was the last time you heard about guys being academically ineligible? Remember how that used to be a thing?
When's the last time you heard about a guy going to class versus logging on to do it?
And is he really logging on? Are we doing biometrics to confirm that it really was Dylan logging in to take the chemistry 304 quiz? Like,
you got to physically go to chemistry class, so I'm told to take that stuff.
So that's why the football players just don't take that class.
Yeah, that was a bad example I brought up.
I think
and they don't go to sports broadcasting 375 either, because you got to be there for that too. But
yeah. Don't forget that. But
yeah,
guys, we'll get into Indiana's dominance. We'll talk portal wants and needs for Nebraska with a week left to go. Reaction to Calandry at quarterback for Nebraska fans after how the week started.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little Husker hoops and dive in there as Nebraska, Indiana get going here in about 3 hours. Always appreciate you checking us out on the Average Joe Sports Show 7 days a week. YouTube, like and subscribe. Twitter, AJ Sports Radio to watch. Flagship home is KFOR, and Facebook and Twitter can go there. Kobe's in, Brian Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Corn Raider is in, along with Patrick and Funky Rocks, Uncle Larry, and Walter. Not happy with Matt Rule at 6:48 this morning, apparently. Husker Tuck in Eat Beef is nice. Timster's here. And Black Hills Brandon Vogel is here. Brian also checking in the stream as well. Vogues, I'm gonna have you spin the wheel. All right. Name me your dream defensive line coach. Let's play this game to start out, because that is the big red alarm going off for some, that Nebraska's not landed much, if anything, in the portal. But there's still time. There's still talent to be had, and there's still a coach to go get. Who would be a splash? Who would be a fit? Who would be both?
I mean, Elijah Robinson was probably that candidate, and Nebraska took a shot, not for the first time with him, and kind of similar to, I think, the general tone of the portal. Didn't end up going that way. So I mean, the name we keep hearing is Oak. It makes sense to me in that regard. I wonder if you wouldn't kick the tire on Terrence and be like, okay, I have Florida State season going. Not that Nebraska's was drastically better, but yeah. Otherwise, it's kind of it's odd that it's taken, I think, this long. And maybe, like, we talked a little bit on the Thursday show, I think, like, maybe it's done from Nebraska's perspective. They're just waiting for whatever reason. But to go into the portal without that spot filled certainly doesn't seem like it's helped anything.
Well,
Yeah.
and do you have a rush of interviews this week? I mean, are guys coming to campus and popping in? I mean, and let me ask you this, and we'll round the hornet too, and get your thoughts. A guy who's been incredible with getting talent from all over the country and sending them off to pretty big time places, not necessarily Lincoln, but places like Clemson and Oklahoma and other spots. Aaron Terry of Iowa Western. I know he's a guy that has had some offers. Nebraska's in on his most recent defensive tackle All-American at the JUCO ranks. Those guys are pretty developed. That the old saying is true, you're at JUCO for a reason, even more so now because of the crunch that's real with this trickle down in the portal world. Aaron Terry's just up the road. Is he a guy that you look at about adding on staff, and how do you make it compelling for him to leave where he's at? Yes, dollars and cents, but he's had other offers before, and Terry's done a really good job for a lot of years.
Yeah, he has, and he's pretty intriguing, I think. Well, based on his track record, obviously, but also, like, Rule has a history of this, and it's not a perfect history, but kind of plucking guys that don't come from kind of the traditional pipeline. Like, of course, he's made those hires too, Mike Eckler, etc. But you have kind of pulling a guy up before maybe even the guy knows. I mean, I don't know what the case. I don't want to speak for Taylor in this, but Terrence Knight hadn't coached football before, and Matt Rule said, "No, I think you can be a D-line coach," or however that went. Garrett McGuire was another one that didn't go so well from Nebraska fans' perspective, but so he does have this track record of kind of getting in or with some people, and based on where Nebraska seems to be at with that search right now, like, it's about as intriguing an option as in terms of potential upside.
Brandon, would you mind reconnecting with us here briefly? You were breaking up a little bit on us. Was that just me that was having that?
No, Vogues reset it, bud, and we'll get you back in here if that's cool. And we'll reconnect with Vogues. The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, going to be with us here in a little bit as well.
It's important to pay your bill, like, they start to throttle it down when you're Yeah.
Dial-up just isn't what it used to be.
I learned that from my curtains last week. You gotta.
Bill, Kraynak, Elijah, is there like this super name out there that you're like, that'd be kind of fun and interesting? Who's good?
I asked the question because Brandon does make a point. Like Matt Rule has had a long history of finding guys from some non-traditional places and pulling them up and showing them, you can make it work at this level. Has that worked with any guy yet at Nebraska? That's
Rich Fisher.
I'm talking under Matt Rule.
Oh, well, you asked.
Under Matt Rule, has there been an assistant coach that came from a non-traditional place that has ended up working out?
Oh man, carry the one.
Well, they've got 50.
Haven't seen it.
We'd have to go. I mean, it's an unlimited coaching staff, right? You have assistants to the assistant. I guess Mosey probably worked out coming from high school because he brought his son, and I think helped get Dawson Merritt and Winery and some other. So I guess there's those connections.
The Will Compton connection.
Simpson, Simpson just
Miami guys.
But yeah, exactly, getting recruiting, but on field.
Well, the non-traditional part was listening to Will Compton to get Mike Eckler.
I can't believe. Do we think that's really how it went, or was that more of like a name drop Will to make Will feel good and to see? Like,
I don't know
because how could you not know about Mike Eckler?
I don't know the true Hollywood story behind it, but his proof X is incredible. So it's a no-brainer when you're hiring special teams guys to bring him in and interview him. It's a no-brainer to probably go throw a bag of money at Bill Bush and let that guy evaluate some talent for you and go find more quarterbacks.
You have a D-line-ish guy already on, the guy that came from San Diego State that's supposed to coach the edges, right?
Manning.
Yeah. Which
he's going to coach the edges on the right side. Then they're going to bring somebody in to coach the edges on the left side. Yeah.
All right, let's get into the hot shot quarterback, huh? And he is a hot shot, by the way. Oh, right. Yeah. If you just think hot shot quarterback, kind of like a little annoying, right? He's like one of those guys. He's got the headband. He's super boisterous.
As the kids would say, Mark, he's got some motion.
Okay. All right, we'll go with that one. I think he also has Riz. I don't know if that's what he has.
Two words that Brandon Vogel, I can see the wheels turning. Motion and Riz
are not in any of those books behind him.
No.
Okay, I'm trying not to be rose-colored glasses guy here, but I seriously love that pickup. I really do, like way more so than Minchie. I would even say, God, a little bit even more than Raiola, just in terms of how the guy plays. Like he plays so freely, he's not worried. Does that guy look stressed out? Does he look like he's trying to be too careful? Does he look like he's overthinking? No, the dude's just balling. He's just playing. And you've heard Rule talk about that. I want guys to just go play. I mean, he's like your poster child for that. Brandon, when you saw that he was in the mix, I don't know how much UNLV you'd watched. I'd watched absolutely none. But then just looked up all kinds of highlights and was watching. What was your takeaway on the type of quarterback that Nebraska is now going to start the year with? Knock on wood, as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of hit on it. His greatest strength is his ability to just like go out there and play. You look at some of the turnover numbers, and that's also a reflection of that. So that year at UNLV, under the tutelage of Dan Mullen, did pretty well on the turnover front, respective to where he had been. It's still one of the things you got. It's kind of part of the package. I think you take a little bit of that in exchange for the go make play gene, which Calandra seems to have in spades. To make it a more 1980s reference. Like he's more Iceman than Maverick, and sometimes that's fun. That's good. And you just kind of live with a little bit of the downside. But Nebraska, it's a type of guy that I thought Nebraska would set out to find. Because Matt Rule had that quote where he talked, I don't care about onslaught. I don't care about, size to a degree. I just want guys who make their team win. At UNLV, he definitely did. And I think even though the Virginia record isn't very good, Virginia wasn't great. His first start as a true freshman was against Kurt Signetti's James Madison. And the Dukes came back and won that game. But Calandria played right out of the gate. His first time getting thrown into the mix as a starting quarterback against what we know now was a pretty darn good James Madison team.
And the comparison that Schmidt and I made with Calandria earlier in the week was he's got a little Baker Mayfield to him. I said Baker Mayfield with 25% less arm strength, and that's not a discredit. It's just not everyone's got the special arm that Baker has. He can gun that thing 70 yards, and Calandria is not that. But in terms of the competitive nature, that juice that he brings, the evasive ability in the pocket, it does remind you of Baker a little bit.
Yeah, in the stream, ask your doctor if Calandria is right for you. Well done, James. You're right. Baker Mayfield's a good comp, and this is not to say that he's going to be a Heisman guy, but just
it's
playing,
exactly what that means.
Okay, screw it.
Like,
let's just go there.
100% Baker Mayfield. That's exactly what Nebraska's getting.
And well, then you're going to love this. He's also Johnny Manziel, and he's also Diego Pavia.
See,
your favorite.
Drunk Monk says Dollar Tree Manziel, maybe like what, $2+ million Manziel?
Also Fernando Mendoza. Yeah. Fernando Mendoza as a Mountain West to Big Ten transfer.
And you've got the Dampier kid. Sorry, I had to get the pups out there, but Dampier's a guy that went from New Mexico, obviously, to Utah. So, and Pavia, was he New Mexico State?
Wasn't he?
I think New Mexico.
Okay, so you've got Dampier and Pavia are both New Mexico guys that jumped to higher major level. Vogues, and if this just got covered, forgive me, but what do you believe about the turnover situation with Calandria? We're talking 20 fumbles and then a bunch of picks. Was it just youth and recklessness? Was it supporting cast, or was it a combination? Do you worry about Nebraska regressing if he wins the job to having some backbreaking turnovers? And you look at how Nebraska's record was during that first year with the turnover issues with Sims. You've got playmaking. You got to live with the good and the bad. I understand, but you can manage a little bit better. You can't play scared, but you can manage decision making for sure.
Yeah, on the interceptions front, like I think that year at UNLV was pretty important. Like his interception rate was 2% this past season. It's actually lower than Raiola's because he threw the ball 450 some times. So yeah, the total climb, and it looks like a little bit more than one per game, which isn't ideal. That part, I think, you manage a little bit, but the double-edged sword of having a quarterback who can make plays when they break down and do it with his legs is the fumbling piece. And for the most part, like that's pretty random. QBs that run the football a lot are going to put the ball on the turf. Just becomes like, do they happen to bounce their hand or the other guy's hands? And at what rate does that happen? So that part of it, I think you just got to live with the interception piece. I'm a little bit optimistic based on just his past season at UNLV.
And Nebraska, after 20 years of folks saying Hey, just win the turnover differential. That's been the thing that's been missing. Nebraska won the turnover differential this year, and they still went 7-5. So maybe they were like, "Hey, we need a turnover-prone quarterback back in the building here."
We also have to tackle people, though. That's the other thing.
If you're amigos, do you dip your toe back into the NIL deal for the
amigos
for the guy who's got 20 turnovers?
Well, what makes sense
push
to
those Apple turnovers again in 2026?
what makes sense to pair with Calandria? I mean, don't you go all in if you're a casino?
Warhorse.
Yeah,
But the Calandria parlay.
yeah.
Calandria colonoscopy doctor, something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of things you can do there with Calandria, but truly,
is he the guy now? I mean, like, is TJ Lateef all of a sudden?
Yes,
we're good. We're good.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
And by the way, we're gonna go get some UCLA defensive players that were on the other side of the ball when Lateef had his best game at Nebraska. So that's what Nebraska's bringing in defensively. And all of a sudden, Lateef, who was the most popular person in Nebraska until Raiola broke his leg, and then didn't have great performances the last 3 or 4 games of the year at, post UCLA, but he's the guy. That's our guy, and it's going to be a quarterback competition. Well, we're going to bring in a $3 million quarterback, and he's the starter, and Lateef's got to be going. I thought I said I liked competition, but I guess is he just now the backup? Has it been decided?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing has been decided
Yeah.
yet. We've got a spring to look forward to.
Oh, stop it.
We do.
No, TJ Lateef's the backup.
I think it'll be more of a competition than that, because I think Lateef improves where I think he probably needs to improve based on those, his 4 or 5 games as the starter. It becomes a question during the offseason, and this will be close battle either way. I think like upside versus stability. And Lateef can be not to make this a political race, but the stability candidate. I think he sticks in that thing, because you do have with Calandria, like, you're going to have high highs and you're going to deal with probably more fumbles, maybe more interceptions.
You have a Lateef's got some athleticism to him, and he's going to have an example now in Calandria that hopefully frees him up a little bit too, right? Because you saw Lateef suffer from the same things as Raiola in terms of pocket presence, and which was kind of surprising during the bowl game. And he played a lot of his games injured post UCLA, or just going up against a buzzsaw of a defense, at Penn State. And then against Iowa, those are tough assignments for a true freshman. So he's going to get an example of a guy of like, just go play, right? Like, you can have the plan all you want, and you should have your plan, and you should study film, and you definitely have to be prepared and do all those things. But when there's a 270-pound edge screaming after you, and he's 2 feet away, it's okay to move out of his way. It is okay to take off and run. It is okay to lower your shoulder. It's okay to throw on the run. I just like the fact that you're going to have a guy that moves and injects some life, has a little bit of a spark, and seems to maintain that spark throughout an entire game. The guy doesn't get tired. He just keeps going. I just think it gives Nebraska way more of a chance than they've had. And that's in recent years.
One thing to note as you do talk a quarterback competition here is the fact that if you do have 2 guys that want to run the football, lower the shoulder. I mean, look at Lateef. I still don't think he was right for the bowl game after injuring that hamstring against Iowa. And you know why you're playing him for much of the game against Iowa, and why you're still playing him against you? It's because you don't trust the guys behind him. You didn't have real competition behind Lateef in that room. And I know Raiola wasn't a runner, but he goes down with injury. If you have Calandria trying to lower the shoulder into defenders as he runs into the end zone or whatever it may be, you open yourself up to the risk of injury more than a statue in the pocket, a guy that wants to get the ball up quick and not be a physical runner. So even if there is a competition that Calandria wins, I mean, Lateef has to be ready week in, week out, because running quarterbacks, they do tend to pick up injuries as the season goes on.
The thing that you've seen, at least with some of the highlights with Calandria, Vogues is his shiftiness, his speed, and I am not calling him Emmett Johnson from a hit and miss type comparison, but we didn't see Calandria miss time due to injury or get like just absolutely smoked. So that mobility factor and the amount of quarterback counter and his ability to use his vision. I mean, I really like it. I like his ability to make throws on the run and just go be exciting in a good way. And I think Nebraska did really good work, not only to pivot as quickly as they did, but they may have gotten the better quarterback, and that's easy to rewrite history with. But this guy's at least started a couple years, right? And he's had to bounce back after a bad game where he's had 4 turnovers or 3 turnovers. From a mental toughness standpoint, you got to have that, and that's what this team wants to develop at a higher level here for 2026. And it's what this basketball team absolutely has now that is the difference for them in the final 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good pairing. I mean, I think to stick with quarterbacks for a little bit, like you look at the quarterbacks that have success, college and even in the NFL, and you look particularly in a transfer portal era, I think it becomes really apparent when like at least 5 and 4-star Elite 11 guys, like if they find success, it's usually 1-2 schools down the road, which, fine, like do whatever's best for you, given the opportunities that are out there. But like at quarterback, I think what you're really after is just that making ability, the game changer gene. Guys who maybe are not 6'4", 220 as a senior in high school and can throw the ball 65 yards, from a stationary spot. It's guys that just kind of go out there and Trinity Chambliss would be a good example. At Ole Miss, there's a lot of them. I mean, we watched Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, go through 4 picks in Lincoln at Wyoming. But those guys that kind of figure out a way to get it done are what you're ultimately looking for at quarterback, and Coach shown a bit of that.
Do we see Nebraska adopt more zone read, more option because Calandria is here? I haven't watched enough of UNLV to know if that was a big part of their playbook or not. I just know it was not a big part of Nebraska's playbook under Raiola.
Yeah, I think that definitely becomes. And that's the other thing about Calandria when you kind of look at him in comparison with Teeth. Like if Data wants to alter the offense, at least in terms of what he can incorporate, things have opportunity to look pretty different. And by the way, coming off of 2025, I think the offense does need to show a bit more. So that's probably a tail of the tape item that's in Calandria's favor before we even get started here.
Well, the big question has to be: has Nebraska done enough in the portal holiday season? And sorry, I didn't get you guys a gift. Has Nebraska done enough on the offensive line to protect and provide for whomever is the quarterback and whomever is going to be at running back? And we can talk about the Kenneth Williams era as well in the same panel discussion as Kenny Minchie. But have they done enough to beef up the offensive line? Apparently, Jeep Wade doesn't like anybody who's here. So if it's Calandria or if it's TJ Lateef or if Luke Longvall gets an 8th year of eligibility, is the quarterback position going to be better because they've upgraded the offensive line?
I think they're off to the right start there. Sorry, Schmidt.
You're in. Go for it.
I've liked the additions they've made so far, and they're still laying on a handful of guys. Like they're actively looking to add there, and I do think in terms of the broader offenses, and like the G Wade addition is important there as well because he just spent the last 2 years coaching at Georgia Tech, where Hayes King was the quarterback. And I thought he was going to die multiple times this season because the guy was just like a battering ram. He was their best running threat. I don't think Nebraska wants to go that, but Jeep Wade definitely has some fairly recent experience with the QB run piece of things.
I like the bodies they've brought in. The trick will be, and there's a couple of guys they're still chasing from that SEC footprint, that it's going to come down to, all right, the physical measurables are there, the talent is there, like there's toughness, there's athleticism, there's agility to be a really good pass blocker and run blocker, but it's being able to get him coached up, right? The missing link has been, does this guy give a crap all the time at the level some of his teammates are? And I'm not picking out one guy. I'm talking about a couple, 3 guys they've been in on. Can you unlock, right, greatness? Can you coach him up? And that's part of the reason you made a change on your offensive line, is to develop and get the best out of guys. And clearly the room, they've collected a whole slew of stars in that offensive line room, but how much bamboo been watered is the question. Not enough to grow tall enough to use. So you're having to go portal, you're having to get older and experienced. And on paper right now, Vogues, you could lay out the offensive line if you make a move on Gatula to left guard. Otherwise, you could be set with your starting 5.
Yeah, and based on we're projecting with the transfer, but they both, particularly Black, have experience, which I think is always the most important thing in terms of O-line transfers. And wouldn't feel bad about that. I mean, just as it's portal season, and a lot of the chatter is about who's coming. Well, look what this guy can do. Look what this guy can do. Like, I think Gatula's gotten probably overlooked a little bit. Yeah, he had some tough reps when forced into duty at left tackle, but still think he's a player who can be a really, really good offensive lineman for Nebraska. So if that's your starting left guard and the other 4 fall into place as we would handicap it now, not bad. Like, I don't feel bad about that group if that's your opening game starting 5.
Well, and the place where I've seen the most increase in competition so far in the portal has been along that offensive line, where there's currently, I'd say 6 or 7 guys along that offensive line that you could all pencil in as starters. Nebraska is still working to flip a guy who just, he's from Baylor. His name escapes me right now, but he just committed to North Carolina earlier in the week, and they had him on campus yesterday trying to flip him. There's going to be legit competition in that offensive line room, assuming they continue to do the work that they are doing on the trail right now. That offensive line room excites me with the added influx of talent that you've had there and the increase in competition you're going to have under a new set of eyes with Jeep Wade.
But what about the guys who are already there?
Sean Tompkins is your kid.
It amazes me. Look, he comes in and look. I think Jeep Wade's probably going to be an upgrade at that position as the offensive line coach, and I'm surprised they haven't brought 3 or 4 assistants in. A left guard coach, a left tackle coach, a center coach, right guard coach, right tackle coach. I'm sure that's in the offing at some point. But are we done? Are we done with Sledge? Are we done with Bricks? Are we done with Knutson? Are all those guys? I mean, Torres is out. Are we developing players or not?
You hadn't been.
Well, I've said
that's
it
my
for
point. Why we even bother recruiting? Players for positions is, Nebraska, I believed in the philosophy of this 26 recruiting class, that it was small because they were going to beef up in the transfer portal. Sign 10, bring in 15, right? And we're going to bring in 15 players who have been developed in other programs. So that's going to make Nebraska better. Meanwhile, the guys that we brought in, in 24, 3, 4, and whatever, that everybody's all excited about, you guys just stay over there, play with the toys we have for you in the locker room. We're going to bring in a bunch of other guys who are going to start because they've developed at other programs.
And I've said this for a couple of weeks now, Bill, and I think Kobe makes a good point here is those guys behind the scenes, this offseason are going to have to learn a whole new technique along the offensive line. It's a completely different technique that Jeep Wade's bringing in. So you're bringing in some guys that follow a more, at least traditional in terms of how it's coached now in college football. They're going to fit in a little bit better. Secondly, the problem with Coach Raiola was never the starting five that he had. He did a good job developing the guys that were playing for him on Saturdays. The issue is the guys behind the scenes never made strides. And I think this gives them an off season and a season to, hey, develop, learn a new technique, get some development done. There's not pressure because you're not going to be playing on Saturdays. You've brought in, hopefully, the goal would be ready-made starters along the offensive line while those guys get some development time. And then the task for Wade is, hey, while these guys are playing on Saturdays, you still need to develop behind the scenes because Coach Raiola never did a good job of that.
Well, you've got two guys, thank God, on the offensive line now in Wade and Teasley. Kind of a throwback to Cotton and Garrison, to Milt and Dan. You need 4 sets of eyeballs or more with that position group to work with the starters, but get the next wave ready. Vogues, I want to get your take on hoops today. Does it turn into Sweet 16 today?
Nebraska, I think Nebraska's going to get a challenge here. I mean, we talked on Thursday before the Hoosiers had won their football game last night. We're talking about maybe it was better for Indiana, for Nebraska basketball, for Hoosier fans to win. I think a lot of them are in Atlanta, so it seems. But now I've reversed course. I'm wondering how many people in Bloomington have not been asleep by the time that Nebraska-Indiana game starts. And I think that might be like long enough to catch your second wind. You have breakfast burrito and you get ready for the basketball game, whatever it takes from the night before. So I'm expecting it to actually be a pretty lively atmosphere despite the early start. Indiana's shot-making ability worries me a little bit as a slight fade over Nebraska, but that's kind of been, for me, Nebraska's calling card is their ability and consistency contesting shots. So if they can keep that up, I would expect a pretty close game today and see if Nebraska can gut out another one.
Indiana's a little more guard heavy. Matchup wise, how do you like that, considering Nebraska's got some defensive stalwarts at the guard spot too, right? With Jamarcus, with Hoiberg especially. What about that matchup and just Nebraska's ability to deal with a guard-heavy outfit in Indiana today?
Yeah, if they can avoid foul trouble, I think you're right. Like, you kind of like the top line there for Nebraska and their ability to defend with Lawrence and Hoiberg. You get into these kind of 3-guard situations, and that's a little bit of a matchup problem, or can be, I think, for Nebraska. So it's there. I think, they're better off against teams that are a little bit more, kind of a traditional 5. But like I said, if you can challenge shots in college basketball today, that kind of becomes, I think, the key to unlocking a team's ceiling. And so far, Nebraska's been there.
Vogues, tell us, partner, about Counter Read, what you and Aaron Sorensen are up to and how folks can get on board with it.
Yeah, you can head to counterread.com. Check us out. It's a Substack newsletter from myself and Aaron Sorensen. We both come at you 2 times a week. 2 of those pieces are available for anyone, and 2 are subscriber only. So get a chance to check us out that way if you want to see what it's all about.
Vogues, appreciate you, brother. And thanks for joining us. And we'll keep the Portal Madness going for another week.
Indeed. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks,
Brandon. Brandon Vogel with us. So a couple of things on the world of Twitter that have been good this week. One was Bob Knight and Tom Osborne on the phone together. And the ghost of Bob Knight, as we welcome in the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, the ghost of Bob Knight calling Tom Osborne saying, "You believe what the hell's happening here between Indiana football and Husker basketball? It's pretty good." That's all right. 2, the other Twitter thing floating around was a picture of a library. And it made me think of Vogues' esteemed office where he does his show hits from. And that was a picture of Dylan Raiola's yearbook collection. So, wow. It wasn't my author work, but it was pretty good. Sharpie, how's Portal Week been, brother? Thanks for joining us.
Good. Does it feel like we still have another week of this and like beyond?
A little bit.
I just want to add to this conversation about Indiana football and Nebraska basketball and this upside down sports world. Do you guys realize that in Nebraska basketball and Vanderbilt basketball are combined 30-0?
Saw that.
Yes. Welcome to bizarro world. But, there's a lot of people that say the Indiana basketball fan is very similar to the Nebraska football fan. Past history, they have a legend that was their head coach. They haven't been able to recreate that magic from 20, 30 years ago. So there'll be a lot of handshake memes in the crowd today for the Nebraska fans that have made the trip over to Bloomington to watch this game. But I think it will be curious on the crowd because a lot of people it looked like the entire city of Atlanta was Bloomington or Indianapolis people yesterday. So, it's a noon tip-off, but we'll see. It's wild that on January 10th, Nebraska and Indiana are playing a game that matters, is one of the top 3 national games of the day.
How you feeling about it with Nebraska?
You know what? Everybody's waiting for them to drop their first game, and then they just find a way to win. Today will be very difficult. This will be the toughest team that Indiana's played at home. But Indiana has scored, 86 or more against all their Power 4 teams at home. They also have, keep this in mind, they also have Darren DeVries as their head coach, which was a great hire by Indiana. Is his forte when he was at Creighton, among other things, was he was in charge of the defensive assignment against Nebraska. And so he would put the lockdown on Nebraska when Creighton would play Nebraska and D-Rock was on Mac's staff. So what does that do today? But you know what? I don't know. You can't doubt this basketball team. They just keep going and playing basketball. I mean, that's all they do. They just go out there and they're well constructed. They do the right things. They find enough ways to win. And so, trying to figure out who they are or where they're going, I just think it's game by game. I don't want to discuss are they an Elite 8 team. I want to discuss that they're 15-0 and they have a chance to be 16-0. And if they win today, you could get very giddy and think, man, they could be unbeaten when they go and play at Michigan at the end of the month, even though there's a trip to the barn in there as well.
And you don't even really necessarily worry. Even if they lose, you don't worry about it derailing their season or anything like that, because it is going to happen. Common opponents, Indiana, they've played K-State also, but they worked K-State. They beat them by 20 plus, if I'm not mistaken. Matchup wise, though, Indiana kind of foul prone. A little more foul prone. They're among the worst in the Big Ten there. Good free throw shooters, though, with the home cooking. So that could be a factor. And then they have a legitimate point guard who actually distributes. I think it's a good matchup. It seems like Nebraska is going to be in for 2 to 3 possession type games almost every time out. Yeah. Right. And I think you're looking at one of those again today. What do you think is who is the person that rises today for Nebraska? Because it seems like it's somebody different every single time based on the matchup. Who has the big night or big morning, I should say?
Well, I think it's going to be Wilkerson is tough for Indiana. I think Sanford. I think this game is very similar to the game in Champaign. There's going to be a lot of points. There'll be some masterful offense. I think Sanford is the guy today. First of all, I would love to put a pedometer on him and see how many steps he gets in, because this will be a game where he's cutting a lot and he's moving without the basketball. But he would be the guy that I would pinpoint as a guy that's got to shoot well to open up other things for everybody else. But as you alluded to, Mark, they're not so dependent on one element, but also another thing is defense. So 5 of their 15 Power 5 teams they played, they have only allowed of those 5 to be a point per possession team. So Michigan State was 0.87. That's pretty salty. So I think today is also a defensive game, but I think you probably got to score into the 80s. I just think it's very similar to the game in Champaign.
That's a deep stat. Can you help kind of orient me here to points per possession? What's good? What's bad? Maybe in terms of baseball.
What's normal?
What is the equivalent of a 300 hitter when it comes to points per possession?
Probably like 1.2, 1.3.
Okay, so if you have a 0.8, then you're batting like 350. something like that.
No,
Like
no, below is worse. Like if you don't get to a point per possession in college basketball, that's not good. That's you have a tough time winning. That just shows you on the other end how good defensively.
Defensively, you hold somebody to a 0.8. That is really outstanding. Yeah. Because 1.2 you say is kind of standard or sort of average. Okay.
You know, the thing as people get to know more about Nebraska basketball, it's really interesting how Fred has changed to adapt to what he likes to recruit in the Big Ten. Is 5 of his 7 years, their defensive metrics have been better than their offensive metrics. And here's a guy that is a whiz with half-court offense that they have relied on the defense to kind of carry him and build their roster that way. And so today is one of those days where they might give up a big chunk number, but do they make the appropriate stops? I think this will be a game. You alluded to, Mark, fouling. You know, Indiana gets a lot of points at the free throw line. I think this will be a game that'll have plenty of possessions, but Nebraska's been so good defensively, whether it be at home or on the road. So at least you have that to hang your hat on if all of a sudden they go 9 for 28 from three-point range like they did on Monday night.
Key thing for Nebraska, and they've done this in their 2 impressive road wins. You saw it Monday against Ohio State. You saw it on the road against Illinois. They're up 15 points. They're up 14 points. They're up. They've got a nice little cushion. That spread is very real on the road because you better be up 12 or 15, Sharpie, if you want to win by 5 in the Big Ten.
Yeah. You know, they're just calm. I mean, they take on the floor their DNA of their head coach. They're just calm, cool, and collected. They don't ride the roller coaster. They're a fun team to watch. They play hard. They don't really shoot themselves in the foot. And you know, I mean, they got some teams upcoming that are going to have like talent or a little bit better. It's just they're a very smart basketball team, like a high IQ basketball team, and I think that can take you a long way. But I just say enjoy the ride here, man. They're not going to go unbeaten. I mean, they're not going to challenge the Indiana great team in '76. They're going to lose some games, and they're not playing in the Elite Eight today. They're playing in Bloomington, Indiana. They don't get to March for a while. So I don't like to project. I just like to enjoy that this is a season that probably majority of us didn't expect. And that makes it more exciting and more enjoyable because it hasn't come out of nowhere because internally they knew that they were going to be good. But I think for the fan base to have something like this where people are talking about Nebraska basketball, they were preseason 14th in the Big Ten and they're currently 10th in the country nationally. I mean, soak that up.
Well, and let's also 14th in the Big Ten was a crazy prediction. Also, I think Rink Masson, like 1 or 2 all Big Ten votes. Like, I think there was a better feeling internally among the state of Nebraska with what this Nebraska team could be. The people who actually paid attention and didn't just look at the logo. I think a lot of people just looked at the logo this offseason and said, well, it's Nebraska. Yeah. But people didn't account for is the fact that it's Fred Hoiberg. And I think he is proving himself right now as one of the top 10 coaches in all of college basketball with what he's done at a place like Nebraska.
Do you think it'll change, guys? So you bring up a good point, Elijah, because we pay attention in college football a lot to the helmets. Like, the Alabama helmet. They'll probably beat Indiana. They'll find a way to beat Indiana. Instead of in this new day, paying attention to the guys that are in the jerseys and that an Indiana can break through, a Texas Tech can break through. Granted, the landscape change where you can break through quicker. But do you think we'll get to that in basketball, where instead of looking at the logos in basketball, we'll look at the guys inside of the jersey? Because Vanderbilt and Nebraska are both 15-0, and ironically have very, very good head coaches in Mark Byington, who was with Signetti at JMU, ironically, and then Hoiberg. Like, we're starting to do that in football, but do you think we'll get to that in basketball?
You had the element of Cinderella in the tournament where, look, there's this little team from New Jersey that's a 15 seed, or Sharpie, the team you were on that ride for. Yeah, Florida Gulf Coast getting into a Sweet 16. I mean, so you have
some news. Sorry.
No, that you have that story that's great, but yeah, you can adopt teams that kind of come out of nowhere in the world of college basketball, especially during March, and it's a ton of fun. What do you got, Kraynak?
We need to get to our Average Joe breaking news desk with Mark Kraynak.
This is a report out of Husker Online that Danny Kalin is expected to rejoin the Huskers.
Yeah, he was in town yesterday.
So Danny
2 former Virginia quarterbacks Coming.
Wow.
Are you rooming
Um,
together?
Nebraska.
So it was, and it's kind of, I think over in Ames, they approached two former prep stars in Nebraska, Zane Flores and Danny Kalin. Whoever wanted that offer first, they were going to take, and the other one was going to be still looking. Zane committed to Iowa State last night. I think that's a nice reacquirement.
So
Because
yeah,
they left on good terms. You know, Nebraska paid Danny to stick around for his year behind Dylan. Like, he got paid really well his lone year here. And, you know, we never really got to see him play because Dylan, you know, fortunately for Nebraska in his freshman year, Dylan played all 13 games, and they didn't play the back. They didn't, you know, there weren't a lot of opportunities to play the backup, but he went somewhere else. And you know what? He's gotten better. If you watched at the end of the year when he played a little bit more for Virginia on a good team, he made strides. That's a good addition to the quarterback room. I would Calandria, Latif, and Kalin. It gives you three different type of quarterbacks.
You're right.
That's a good welcome them back home type of addition.
I would say Latif and Calandria play more similar to each other though than Kalin. Not saying it's a bad addition, but does Kalin necessarily fit an offense where Calandria and Latif are they're more mobile?
Yeah.
And not to say Kalin isn't, but he doesn't quite have the mobility that those other two have.
No.
How about the room now? How about the room now has three guys that have played or started in a Power 4 game?
Yeah, exactly. That's a rare situation, and that does breed the kind of competition that I think we've all been looking for at every position for a long time. You have that now. That's a great point you bring up, Gary, because it's three dudes who have started, three guys who are Elite 11 kind of caliber, all on the same roster. That's rare. You're not gonna have that in many places. Kalin strikes me more as your classic developmental guy, right? Like, is he ready to be a superstar right now? No. He's a guy that I think needs to progress, get better and better, and by the time he's a junior or senior, then he's a legitimate candidate to do something different, because this will be his third year coming in, if I'm not mistaken, because he came in the same time as Raiola, so he's on track, right? I don't think he was enough of a playmaker to warrant being an immediate impact freshman guy. But he's got a good build. You know, he's 6'3", he's 220, something like that. Good size, got a good live arm. That's a solid pickup for Nebraska. Now, if they can figure out how to tackle people from the defensive line position, that would be amazing.
Sure.
That is where Nebraska. Gary, what's up with that? Like, it's almost like there's a force field around Lincoln, and defensive linemen are not allowed to like come here.
Well, they're getting outbid for some defensive linemen, and a little bit of it is they don't have a physical position coach.
And also, Matt Rule said it before, D-line is low on his priority list in terms of what he is paying out of the portal and just generally in roster construction, which I think is part of the issue of why last year the defensive line was so weak. But that's not top priority for him to go out and spend big money on defensive linemen.
Why?
Well, I also
and I'm not saying this. You have to defend him, Elijah. But why? What are we talking about?
I think
was
that's
a really needed position.
That's a fair thing. I'm going to look at it from this standpoint, just trying to figure out the way they've approached the defensive line. Now, again, it's the second straight year Nebraska has not had a full-time defensive line coach. Last year they had a guy that was in Kansas City and Lincoln. Now they don't officially have a position coach. I mean, maybe if it's Frank Oakham of Houston, you all of a sudden are a big Steelers fan on Monday night. But I think they probably, like I always say this, the running back room, the public discussion to the internal discussion is about as wide apart as you can imagine in terms of, hey, go get a guy. And Nebraska seems to be pretty comfortable the last 2 years with their running back room, even though I think there's a running back on the horizon possibly. I think with defensive line, they say, okay, we're going to a full 4-2-5 with 4 down linemen, guys that are already in our system. We think they will be better than they were this past year because they're going to play truer positions. That's all I can think about. But they are running into some problems of being outbid on the defensive line. But back to Elijah's point, that would make a lot of sense. If that's not your number one priority, where you say, okay, do we start at 6 or 7 figures, high 6 or low 7 when we're going to get a defensive lineman? And also Nebraska hasn't, it's not like they have a pipeline to the NFL out of the defensive line position.
That's 15 years in the past, right? I mean, he just turned 39 in Ndamukong Suh. But what you do have is this. You have Oregon and you have Indiana on display last night. Oregon's defensive line making waves this postseason. Incredible. Got lit up by what Indiana did on the offensive side, flipping it around. Indiana's defensive line looked incredible. And then you have Miami's defensive line, right? Those are 3 teams and programs that have gone a little bit differently. Oregon and Miami similar with what they spend and how they recruit. Then there's Indiana that gets guys and turns them into 4 and 5 stars. At least they look like it in 3rd and 8. And that's what Nebraska fans are just clamoring for, Sharpie, is to get back to that where you can get a couple of guys, whether it's a super high-profile guy that lives up to it or an under-the-radar guy that gets developed into something big time. What do you make of what we know is still here? Again, there's a week from today, the portal ends, but with what Nebraska has on staff and what Nebraska has in that defensive line room, you feel better? Do you feel worse? Do you feel the same? Or are you just like, talk to me here in 3 weeks after the coaches convention and you finally have an announcement of who the defensive line coach is? Yeah, is it Orich making the hire? Is it Rule's input still? You've got Manning to work the edges. I mean, where does Nebraska go so they can start playing like what you just saw the last couple of weeks with the college football playoff at that spot?
I think that's a tough question to answer because they're not complete yet. But you can't have guys on campus that you really like that commit elsewhere. Like if you really like them and they're on campus. Yeah. And especially at that position, I think it's incomplete. I'll give it another week. I think they're going to ask a lot of the guys that are still around on the defensive line to make that jump. The thing that is, they need to probably figure this out. Doesn't it seem like, and they love the 2-year portal guy because the second year they pop. But what happens to the freshmen that start to show something and then the sophomore year, they're not able to match what they showed maybe at the end of the year? It's an interesting dynamic in terms of development of the portal guy pops year 2, but why does the freshman who starts to show you something, then when he plays a little bit more as a sophomore, he doesn't match what you were thinking? And we're looking at guys like a Davis and a Shavers and a McGahee and a Lenhart, those kind of guys. But I will tell you, you need to find a defensive line room and coach that develops and keeps them, because Thursday night, you're watching that game and it's become a trenches sport. I mean, production over potential is what Indiana does. They have an elite eye for talent. They know what fits with what they want to do. They have continuity from the coordinators and the position coaches that have worked with Cignetti. Is how did you not look at that game and the Ole Miss defensive line and go, hey, didn't that guy used to play at Nebraska?
I know.
Who flashed a little bit as a freshman, but then as a sophomore seemed to get washed out. And then he goes to Ole Miss, and then you're like, that's the guy that I saw 2 years ago in Princeville.
And I think it's a huge deal that there's nobody in that defensive line coach's room. If you're bringing guys on campus and you walk them through the palace and there's an empty office, that has to be the most important thing in this transfer portal. There's nobody in that room right now, but there will be. It's just an empty desk. And you alluded to it a moment ago, Gary, that the camaraderie amongst offensive linemen and defensive linemen is probably where it is most prevalent in those 2 rooms. I mean, those guys are bands of brothers. Not that you don't have unity in defensive back rooms and running back rooms and all that, but in the trenches, those guys are in sync and they are choreographed together and they fight together and they play together. And to not have the guy who is going to be the leader attracting players to come in. I want to play for that guy and enjoy the sleep pods and all the other stuff that comes with playing in Nebraska. But to not have somebody in that room who looks like them, might have the belly sticking out a little bit and, a chaw in the, a dirty styrofoam cup. They want to know who that guy is going to be, and Nebraska can't offer that.
But can I add to this conversation, though? If you want to go glass half full here on Nebraska, trying to drag in their feet in the defensive line room, there is tons of defensive linemen in the portal every single year. And it's because of the fact you look around a roster, how many quarterbacks play in a given game? 1. How many offensive linemen are playing? 5. Defensive backs? 5. How many defensive linemen are playing? 8, 9. Add special teams with some of the defensive linemen and defensive ends, and you have tons of defensive linemen that are playing in a game on any given Saturday. So there are tons of options in the portal to go to. And if you look at Indiana, I think they're a great example. Their defensive line, you look at that room, none of those guys were like the must-go-get prospects out of the transfer portal.
No.
If you can nail your talent evaluation, you can go get options in a defensive line. I mean, I think Nebraska probably needs, on the interior of the defensive line, probably 2 guys. They got an edge. So, there's tons of options, and Nebraska needs to supplement the room. But I think Nebraska thinks they can keep on going down their list of guys because there's numerous defensive linemen in the transfer portal and say we can still nail our evaluation and get the right guy for the right price.
Go get Ed Orgeron. Go get Ed Orgeron. Let's have some fun. Let's have some fun. Let's have him, recruit living rooms all throughout the South. Bring in some guys to Nebraska. Let's just have some fun. There was talk about him going to LSU, and Lane Kiffin got his gig. Let's just bring him in and have fun. That'll attract some people.
Think how great of a podcast guest he would be weekly for Matt Rule.
Oh, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something?
You remember when
your podcasts? Yeah.
So when Riley was the head coach, Orgeron came in for a practice in the spring and held court. And was asked if he was going to be added to the staff. I mean, it was amazing. There must have been 35 reporters surrounding Orgeron at the Hawks Championship Center in the lobby interviewing him because he was coming around colleges, and I don't know, he has some connection to somebody who was on Riley's staff, and so he came in and watched Nebraska. And he was like, "I'd love to be here. I'd love to be here." I don't know. They need
call.
Make it happen.
The thing about where college football is giving the Indianas of the world another chance, and some other, and why the Big Ten has elevated is you watch the 2 games that were played. I mean, Miami is more physical than an SEC team. The SEC is being hurt. They can't hoard players. So the depth, those great players that were number 2s because they couldn't get on the field because the number 1 was so good, they're going elsewhere and they're a star. But where it's starting is the defensive line and the physicality that the SEC used to brag about and have during that stretch from 06 to 22, that's now not there. And so teams around the country that are beating SEC teams on a big stage, they are more physical than them because their offensive line and defensive lines are a lot stronger and a lot more physical. And I agree with you, Elijah. I think we're in the second wave of the portal. I think there's probably some guys that would be on Nebraska's radar that still aren't in the portal. That either Nebraska is aware of, that once they're in the portal, then, things start moving, or they've already moved. But, we look at yesterday. Did you expect the Michigan running back to jump into the portal? So I think we're in the middle of that second wave where there could be some more guys, but for the off-season worry, it would be nice to get a guy that you can look at and go, man, that's a starter. Because I think Nebraska's probably got 5 or 6 guys that are a starter out of their haul of 8 so far that you could say they're definitely starters.
Well, so real quick, defensive line, and we're talking specifically about the interior. I feel like Nebraska has plenty of options for the edge positions, but
and
for
the
interior,
will take a jump,
right? And so I think you're pretty good there. But in terms of guys on the roster, like if you had to play a game today, you got options on the interior there that are Gabe Moore, Tyson Terry, maybe Huffkin, maybe
Riley Van Poppel.
And Riley Van Poppel. That's it. I mean, really, that's what you got.
Yeah,
on
Simpson.
the interior.
You
Okay,
got
Simpson.
Malcolm Simpson,
Okay.
who it'd be
There's
nice to
one
get
more.
like an update on how his rehab has gone.
Mhm.
But I'm just saying,
'Cause
none of
I-
those guys,
yeah.
none of those guys have really produced at a high level outside of
Yeah.
Van Poppel when he was a freshman, right? He took a step back this year, but that's what you're rolling with right now. It just feels like red alert status that you have to prioritize. I was just surprised to hear Elijah say that they're not, that Rule is not prioritizing that position. It's like, what do you know that we don't?
There's a difference between prioritizing with going out and evaluating and bringing guys in for visits and monetarily with the amount of dollars you have to spend going out and spending it. There's a difference there. It's not that they're not prioritizing finding guys. It's they're not prioritizing going and making huge splashes along the defensive line, I don't think.
And let's also be honest. Not everybody wants to come to Nebraska.
What?
I mean,
yeah.
What do you mean?
They've got Matt.
Won a national title in 1997.
Bill
Who
Doleman.
wouldn't want to coach?
Turn it around
Play
over the
for
top. Do it now. I don't ever want to see that again. But no, Nebraska's identified some of the same fellas that everyone else has. That you're an immediate help on the defensive line in the interior. The problem is once they get to Lubbock, that check talks and they don't leave.
And can I ask the question? And I kind of want to get Gary's thoughts, but kind of everyone, is there a chance that this Nebraska staff internally, especially after Matt Rule going and coaching in bowl practices, feels better about the interior of their defensive line than anyone in the fan base does?
Based on what you saw against Utah, it's like, why?
You look at some of the younger options that you have in that room in terms of development, and Keona Davis, I don't think fit whatever new scheme is going to be coming in, but I think there's potentially a belief that Van Poppel getting back to a more natural position and an even front can really help his development. Gabe Moore, I know he played limited snaps this year. He's a guy that's still kind of acclimating to college football, but I think there's some belief that he can be a lot better. Malcolm Simpson, we didn't get to see this year, but I think they're really high on what Malcolm Simpson can be.
Tyson Terry.
Snaps. Mm-hmm. Tyson Terry's a guy that was injured all last year. I think there might be a possibility that behind the scenes, there's a better feeling internally about the future of that defensive line than anyone out here in the fan base or the media believes.
Sharpie talked to me about Iowa Western, what they've done with their defensive line and their coach and the prospect that Nebraska's trying to land, that All-American defensive tackle, Berberja, or however I butchered that. Berberet, thank you. I'll buy a vowel, Alex, thank you. But ballpark that for me here, man. What do you think Nebraska's chances are? And is Iowa Western's coach an option possibly for addition to the staff?
So, and remember, they also are pursuing a addition to the class of 26 at defensive line. But it's amazing. We've had this discussion, especially here in Omaha. Tom Osborne helped found the Iowa Western football program that under Scott Strohmeyer has become a junior college juggernaut. But yet there's no players that cross the river and drive down 80 that come to Iowa Western or come to Nebraska from Iowa Western.
There was like a backup kicker.
They're walk-on guys. Yeah. So it's a question we ask all the time. The two-time reigning Jet Player of the Year, the Jet Award Player of the Year, Caden Weegan from Iowa. Iowa and Iowa State have a great connection to Iowa Western because a lot of those kids are Iowans, but Iowa and Iowa State recruit them. And Nebraska they say we're going to recruit Iowa Western, and Scott Strohmeyer and his staff, and I know Stroh, and he has given Nebraska on a yearly basis, like he does other schools, hey, we think these are the guys that could play in the Big Ten. If you want to come and watch them, this is when we practice. Hey, whatever you need. I'm wondering if Dave Tollefson, who you're alluding to, who helped out during the bowl practice, great dude, won a Super Bowl with the New York Giants, has been involved in Iowa Western football and local football here in Omaha for a long time. He knows of what they do with defensive linemen at Iowa Western. Aaron Terry is his position coach. Tyson Terry is one of the best football minds that I have ever interacted with. And he knows the lines of scrimmage. And the fact that if you look at and I brought him up earlier in the week because I saw that he was going to Michigan State. And, he had a great year, but had not committed anywhere. And, and he has 3 years to play too, junior college All-American. And I'm like, if Pat Fitzgerald sees something, why can't Nebraska? And then he went to Clemson. And I'm thinking, he's going to schools where they have a lifeblood of defensive linemen. So I was glad to see that he's making a visit today.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't let him leave campus. I would make sure that he stays close to his junior college home and ends up at Nebraska because he can play in the Big Ten. He's a fire hydrant that I think would cause issues and would be really good right in the middle of the line of scrimmage on that defensive side. And plus, they're going to keep producing defensive linemen at Iowa Western. So if he comes to Nebraska and has success, that next kid that's in Council Bluffs goes, whoa, look what they did with him. He's now going to the league. So I think there's a lot of layers to this. I think Nebraska, it's probably Nebraska and Clemson this weekend for him. And that would be a good addition.
Is it as simple as, hey, everyone's and pick a staff, right? Everyone's telling me we should go up the road to Iowa Western and start knocking on doors. If I'm the head man and pick a head man over the last 10 years, they don't want to hear it. Is it as simple as that? Why have you not tapped in? Why is Clemson? Why is Oklahoma? Why is the SEC? Why is everybody else getting the kids out of Iowa Western?
I think it's probably also a feel of does the head coach and position coaches like recruiting junior college players? The junior college player has kind of got ignored during the portal run here. There's some really good dudes that play in junior college. They just won the national championship, and they got guys going all over the country. So I think it starts at the top with your comfortability in recruiting junior college players, your familiarity, and if you're willing to do it. And Rule's staff have shown that they're willing to make offers, and they have. Deshaun Singleton was a junior college guy. I just think in this case, they probably have some intel of, hey, this guy's available. This guy would be somebody you need to take a look at, and they took a look and they offered him. I don't think they would offer him this late if they didn't think they had a real chance.
Okay.
Because they don't want egg on their face.
They got John Hall out of there. That's not bad. Get some kickers out of there at least.
Well, I mean, Andrew Van Ginkel, remember, started at South Dakota, transferred to Iowa Western, went to Wisconsin. And I think he is the highest. Yeah, I think he's the highest earning player that's ever played at Iowa Western, and that was 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, they've sent 339 guys D1, 110 Power 4. Right, so we're not talking about they just get a handful of dudes every now and then. They're sending 20 some dudes to college to bigger ranks every year.
Yeah, it would be. I'm interested to see over the transfer portal era how many players have been asked to leave their situation. There's the kid from Kansas State that posted on Twitter the other day, I've been told I'm not wanted. I guess I'm in the transfer portal now. And there are many, many, many more like that just seem to be somewhat public. How many who are in their first year or who may have redshirted that they don't find a home necessarily at an FCS or Division II that find themselves going from Kansas State, for example, or Clemson or Iowa State, Nebraska, going into a junior college program for their, I guess would be their sophomore, maybe their redshirt freshman season, because there's no home for them at a 4-year college. So they've got to go to junior college if they still want to play college football. Thankfully, they've not exhausted their first 2 years of eligibility. So they end up at places like an Iowa Western to try and build themselves back up and get seen to get another chance at a 4-year school. I've not seen any study like that, but I would be interested to see how many over the portal era have found themselves in that situation where they've had to go to a 2-year college to build themselves back up because they've been asked to leave.
Yeah, and Iowa Western's a place to go that I think probably there's also some players that go, man, I can go to Iowa Western and rehab, and they're going to turn me into a really good player, and they're going to increase my profile. If I do my duty, they will help me. And I think that's a selling point of Iowa Western because they get guys that get placed at Iowa Western that are like, hey, this guy, it just didn't work out here. Can you help him and then maybe steer him back our way? So it's it's a mystery. The program's been around for 17 years, and Nebraska hasn't been able to just consistently grab a guy here or there that comes in and plays and does well. Maybe this would be the start at a pretty crucial position.
Yeah, it'd be a good start.
Just an example. Last year, Cooper Johnson out of Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
He's on Ole Miss's roster. He went to Ole Miss from Iowa Western, right? Lincoln to Council Bluffs to Ole Miss.
You're from Southeast, right?
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know. Hopefully they fix that. There's something else that happened this week in the transfer portal with a couple withdrawals, which was interesting to me. I think we all had those players in a recruiting class where you're like, okay, maybe this isn't the high profile guy, but this is somebody that I got my eyes on just based on the film that I've seen. And that guy for me was Larry Tarver a couple years ago out of Miami. Just loved how that dude played, how physical he was. I looked at it and saw that he was entering the portal, and then Braylon Prue did. Both those guys decided to come back. What do we think that says about – is that a situation where they go in the portal and then it's Orich and his team being like, whoa, no, hey, you're our type. Like you have a chance to play here. Don't worry about whatever happened last year in past defenses. We think you fit here. Is that probably what's going on, or is it they get in the portal and there's no bites?
I don't know.
Because it was good to see him that he decided to come back.
Yeah,
Tarver.
I also
he's
think
a physical player.
I also think, kind of like the DeMond Williams situation, which you guys have talked about this week. People get bad advice. They get people in their head that don't have their best interest, and they make, quick decisions about, I'm going to go in the portal. And then somebody goes, why are you in the portal? Do you not know where you were on the depth chart? And that's something coaches battle. It's not just football. It's through all sports now with the portal. I'm not sure in their particular case, because they come back and I'm still like, wow, that room is pretty deep, and I don't know where your positions are. I will tell you the other end of the portal, there's some guys that have gone into the portal that I go, who is that guy?
Yeah.
That's not good. When you go,
yeah,
what class was he in?
Mm-hmm.
But don't you guys think that we're into a situation where, it used to be guys would come and wait, like quarterbacks would come to places and wait. Quarterbacks don't wait anymore. Aren't we the boomer bust is now down to 2 years? And
it's
the
even, window.
Unfortunately, offensive linemen. It's even offensive linemen who probably need a little bit longer to develop. Is if you're not making moves by the end of your second year, we already go, well, why don't you go in the portal? We'll go get another guy that's going into his third year that has shown us production. Do you think that's changed?
I think things are sped up. The expectation, not only from a coach, but from a high-profile recruit, is to hit the ground running and be a contributor and eventually be a difference maker. And that timetable is massive. Right now, if you're not playing or contributing or making plays at the end of your redshirt sophomore season, year 3, I think you're probably processed. If you're a high-level recruit and, all right, there's talent there, but you haven't kind of clinged on to the work ethic or how you do things around here, that is, you're done after 2 years, per se. I still think your patience level needs to be 3 years with show me something on the practice field, show me something on the field for the lines of scrimmage before you punt somebody. I think from a skill standpoint, your wide receivers and your backs, those guys can play early and often. The problem is a lot of those guys don't and won't wait, like the quarterbacks. Yeah. They won't wait and get developed. Like, I really am excited. I think a guy that's put time into the program that could have a really good role or even break out is Quinn Clark next year.
Yes.
He's a guy that's been in the program 2 years. You've seen a flash here and there. He's comfortable. He's confident. You expect him to take off and be a primary performer for you. he's stayed and stuck with it. You need more cases like that. You can't be impatient, but you also got to know when to eject. That's the key.
Oh, it becomes all this discussion about, and Indiana seems to be about, every current discussion about where you are or where you're going or where you're not in college football is based around Indiana. And that's a tough comparison because that guy that's coaching Indiana is a unicorn. They have so many things that are built in that they're really good at their job. I mean, we're kind of afraid to say it. We say Mark Cuban before we say Signetti. I say Signetti.
No,
He's really good at his job. They play clean fundamental football. They're coached so well. They have continuity, which has hurt Nebraska. They have continuity with the coordinators and position coaches that have been with Signetti. So they know what they want. They know how they teach it. They know what they're going to get. You have to evaluate. You have to have an elite eye for evaluation and projection. To look at a kid in the portal or in high school and go, this is where I can see him going, and this is where he'll be in our program. Because we know this guy, this is the way he teaches. So this is where I see him. That was, if you go back to the golden days, Nebraska could convince guys to come and sit because they gave them a plan. They told them, this is where you are. This is where you're going to be. This is how it'll look. And guys bought into that. One, you were winning, so they wanted to be a part of that. But it's all about evaluation, development, getting them on the field, and then making them better. And Indiana's different, but I don't know. I think 2 years is probably, we start to make decisions on head coaches sooner, right? They might sign 5-year deals, but if year 3, it's not popping, you're like, is this ever going to pop?
Mm-hmm. Indiana, they got to be cheating, right? I kid a little bit. But
there's no more cheating. I mean,
have you heard their philosophy on practice? It's crazy. No. And they beat the hell out of them in spring ball and fall camp. But once the season rolls around, they practice 60 to 90 minutes a day with minimum contact. They do most of their work in the film room. It flies in the face of everything you thought you knew about college football. 60 to 90 minutes a day on the practice field. Not to say they're not putting in the work, because they spend tons of time in the film room, in meeting rooms, going through what they need to go over. But Signetti's whole take is, hey, if you have to go 3-hour practices and you have coaches in the facility from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m., he said, you're not being efficient with your time. I want experienced guys here, whether that's players or coaches, that know how to maximize their time in the football facility. It flies in the face of what we think we know about development in college football.
That's interesting because they play at a certain pace, right? Their pace is different across the board. They just play at a different speed. Watching last night, you do get shades of like a 95 Nebraska, right? Of just as soon as the ball's snapped on offense, like that offensive line for the opponent just gets decimated, right? Like they crush the pocket. It's incredible to watch them play.
Well, you know why that is. Why you get shades of Nebraska from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, who did Nick Saban lean on when it came time to move to Alabama? Who did Nick Saban
Let's open the gate?
Yeah, let's just let them all run.
Sorry, Schmidt, I'll let you finish.
No, I was just going to say, Saban reached out to T.O., Charlie, all those guys. How did you do what you just did?
Yeah.
And it was development, it was practice, it was physicality, it was depth, it was evaluation that that Sharpie, you're right on about. And that was the blueprint that Saban took and kind of perfected at Alabama. Signetti was part of that staff. There's a family tree part of this Nebraska football program with what Indiana's doing, honestly, because of the Saban coaching tree.
And to add to that, Nebraska had teams full of guys that spent 3 years developing behind the scenes, and they hit your senior year, you're 22, 23 years old playing college football. Look at Indiana. The average age of Indiana's roster is just over 23 years old,
which is crazy.
Production over potential.
Average age.
And this stat was going around last night. The average age of the Green Bay Packers is 25.2 years old. The Indiana Hoosiers are almost as old on average as the Green Bay freaking Packers.
Yeah.
Get old, stay old has been a mantra in the last 5 years. You know,
And that was, when players would play against Nebraska back in the 70s and the 80s, they would always ask guys, the opponents after the games, what do you think about Nebraska? And they'd say, it's really tough to be lining up against them when their guys have beards and our guys don't. They haven't even started to shave yet, because Nebraska had guys that were around a long time. But the key word in all that is efficiency. And that's what Tom's program is all about. And don't forget, Craig Bohl molded North Dakota State when he took that job after what they did at Nebraska on a smaller scale, because you didn't have 150 guys. You had 80 guys. But North Dakota State's great run, which continues other than this year's shocking loss to Illinois State in the first round, that whole program up there was built on what Craig Bohl learned at Nebraska, and it's just been perpetuated through to what they're doing these days. So, the Osborne legacy, one thing that this is really kind of a major aside, but it's been on my mind for a couple of weeks. When they named the Indiana offensive lineman was the MVP of the bowl game, where the whole offensive line was it. And it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This has never been done before. Dave Remington was the freaking Big 8 offensive player of the year. The offensive player of the year was a center at Nebraska. So when they're all effusive in their praise, and their offensive line is magnificent, and they dominated that game. But I'm like, Dave Remington, a center, was a conference player of the year. Think about that. So nice job honoring the kid for the great game that he had. But Nebraska had a center that was the player of the year in a conference. It's amazing.
And well past.
Thank you for letting me get that off my chest after 3 weeks.
Well, but it does speak to the importance of the trenches, because then fast forward, 20, 30 years from that, and you had Sue in New York as a Heisman Trophy candidate as an interior defensive lineman. This is why it's so maddening to be a Husker fan. Is how do you not just take that blueprint and work the hell out of it? Like, why are you trying other things? why are you trying anything but that? Right? Of just like prioritize the trenches, have really violent practices, really invest in strength and conditioning. It's maddening to see the different routes that Nebraska has tried, when it's just like, it's like the blueprint is obvious. The same one was used at Bama. Same one's being used at Indiana now. It was used at North Dakota State, like Bill just pointed out. Why are we messing around with these other ways of putting a program together?
Coaches want to think that they have the ability to do the same thing that everybody else is doing differently. And as a result, you're doing the same thing that everybody's doing, and you're not doing it nearly as well.
Yeah.
You think you can reinvent the wheel, and you can't. And what Tom did, nobody would have the guts to do today. Paul Johnson, when he went to Georgia Tech, like 20 or 30 even years ago, put the option in at Georgia Tech, and they started winning games. But it was like, because I think he was a service academy guy when it was only Nebraska and the service academies running the option. And Paul Johnson was actually like, you know what? They're winning at Nebraska this way. I'm going to do this at Georgia Tech. And Bobby Houck at Montana, I used to, do games when he was at UNLV and then in the Big Sky. And I had a conversation with him one time, and he said, the greatest offense ever invented in football is the option. Nobody can ever figure it out, but nobody wants to do it because they don't think players want to play it. And so it's on the shelf, and they just leave it as this novelty for the service academies to go do what they do. But he said nobody wants to coach it because they don't think players want to play it. And so they end up doing what everybody else is doing and just think that they can do it better, and they can't.
Where's Raiola going? Anybody know? Dylan?
One more thing before we say goodbye.
Where's Dylan Raiola going? Heard Oregon, heard Syracuse.
Where's Donovan Raiola going? Where's Dayton Raiola going?
Oh, that's a great question.
So, Bill, are you asking? Are you asking if you have to take all three if you're a program?
I don't know. I have seen
Let's make a
State's
deal.
Gonna get, Appalachian State or Charlotte's finally going to get Dayton Raiola, and he's going to take his brother and uncle.
Like I hear Oregon, and I'm just like, that's not a good fit, right? Like Oregon likes to move their quarterback a little,
especially because
it's a great fit if I'm a Raiola. Hell yeah.
And if you're Dante Moore, do you want to go play quarterback for the Raiders or the Jets or one more year at Oregon? I know damn sure what I'm picking.
Especially after last night. I mean, you
can make more money, probably.
Well,
Pete Carroll's a listener. Chill.
Pete goes out. He's gone.
Yeah, Pete's gone.
Yeah.
You need to play for a brand new coach. Probably Brian Flores.
Yeah, I'm sticking around in college first and foremost.
Yeah, Uncle Phil can give me a bag of about $6.5–7 million, $5 million, whatever it is to stay.
And does Dylan Raiola strike you as the kind of guy that wants to go sit somewhere next year?
No, but it would tell me a lot about it would tell me a lot about hitting the reset button in the path.
I think he should. I think it'd be good for his overall development if he were to sit for a year and kind of get some of the limelight off of him. But he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that wants to go sit for a season.
Because I think he was at the game last night. I mean, he's down living at home in Atlanta. I mean, Oregon makes sense because of the name and the program. They do have, and also that they've not pursued. I give credit to the Raiolas for this. It's been really quiet. Like this whole process has been super quiet. And I think that's intentional. And, the teams you're looking at are probably still playing or now finished is if you go to Oregon, it makes sense. Oh, by the way, Oregon plays host to Nebraska in this upcoming year. But if you had to sit because they're not pursuing other portal quarterbacks, they have a high school kid on campus that is now, I think, 2 years in the program that they really like. He'll have to go and have competition. I don't think Oregon's a place that says you're our guy and you're automatically the guy. You're going to have to prove it to us. We also don't know when he's fully healthy to begin, ramping it up, because of his leg. But he's going to go somewhere. He's going to fall up, and we'll pay attention. But he's not playing at Nebraska next year. Yeah. Okay, we got to focus on the guys that are playing at Nebraska. But if it is Oregon, Nebraska, and you have to face Dylan, God, won't that be a fun week?
Oh, it'll be nuts. It'll be incredible.
Yeah. I'm just curious how attractive he is based on how it ended here. It's no secret. It's no secret anymore about the meddling, about the brother, about the uncle, all these things. Like
talent's talent though, and his throwing ability is good. Now
it's elite. It's really good.
There's work that needs to happen with his pocket awareness. There's offensive line play. There's help he needs. To be as good as he can be, but there's absolute throwing talent there. That's not a fluke.
Downfield?
Well, I'm talking about the 45-yard out that is an 8-yard completion that he, threw pretty routinely. That not no one on the old board here.
Why did he throw it 45 yards downfield?
Why don't you? I don't know. You should have taken more and
He was about to, and then he got smothered by a defensive
Thank you,
lineman.
Kraynak.
He was going to.
Somebody screwed up the line protection call, and oops.
We got tired of seeing the fade in the end zone. Yeah,
maybe don't check.
I don't know. Wasn't completed.
Well, you know what? The thing about Dylan, and he's got a lot of work to be the kind of quarterback he wants, and we don't know what he's looking for. Is wherever he's going, whatever they do with him, we're 2 years of football of where kind of what you're getting with Dylan. Is Dylan going to be different at a different place where there's no connection?
Yeah.
There's no, hey, your uncle's the O-line coach. Your dad is one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. He's going to a place where they don't have any connection to him. So they don't have any stake in the game. They don't have like, oh man, it's the family. He'd be going to somewhere completely new. I don't know. I don't know what he wants. But I got a feeling that he'll look a little bit different from last year. And, Nebraska's got a new quarterback. Just let him announce where he's going. And then I think we all need to move on. And then if it happens to be a school that Nebraska plays in the fall, we won't be able to move on. But
No kidding.
you know, it whether Nebraska failed him or he failed Nebraska, we've talked about it now for 6 weeks. Nebraska got their quarterback one, and we'll see if that's a better fit for the program and if it's a better fit to move a stale offense forward.
That's about right. It's Gary Sharp, Pride of Fairbury, Bill Doleman, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We'll talk tomorrow. Join us.
What about Husker baseball?
Sunday live.
Pretty soon.
Yeah, but they're not bringing. Do you see that? They released some pictures yesterday. Where's the skinny N?
What happened?
No,
They still have the big. They still have the big fat N on the hat.
We'll tackle that tomorrow at 10:30. I promise.
Send me the link.
Hey, guys, think Packers or Bears tonight?
I have Bears in a confidence pool, so
I want to see Chicago Buffalo Super Bowl.
Whoa.
Yeah. That's in Chicago, right?
Yes. Tonight on Amazon with Al Michaels.
And lots of
He's back for another year next year, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, he was more excited announcing that than he is actually in the game.
So we'll tackle the skinny versus large N tomorrow. Maybe more portal news, reaction to Nebraska, Indiana that tips off. Some of us need to get to the bar and
90 minutes.
Get a spot for sure.
What bar is open right now, Schmitty?
It's none of your damn business, Elijah. But we'll be back at it Sunday live tomorrow. Like and subscribe to the Average Joe Sports Show YouTube 7 days a week, on Twitter, AJ Sports Radio, AJ Sports Pod, KFOR, Facebook, Twitter as well. And we'll talk to you manana with the Average Joe Sports Show. Thanks so much.